welcome to or welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lena and I make college and book related content here on YouTube, and today I'll be sharing with you all my July wrap up. Which is more than I've read in June, I think, so that's great. A mix of books this month. I read one book that I was obsessed with, but a lot of mediocre books that I didn't love or just didn't care that much about. The first book that I read in the month of July was The Dark Queens by Shelley Puhak. I got this book out of my library. It was a non-fiction book, and it talks about two queens who were rivals of each other. They were Fredgerund and Brunhild, and they lived in what we know today as France, but they were living in that region, and they had an extreme rivalry against each other. They married brothers, and because of land disputes and heirs and inheritances, there was a lot of fighting. There was a lot of bloodshed between the two on their hands and at their hands. And it was pretty dark times, honestly, with what was going on, hence the Dark Queens. And this book really just takes a look at the two reigns under these women and how different they were, but also what they accomplished, how powerful they were. But there's not a lot of writings about them, contemporary or historical, because they just weren't written about that much. And so the author kind of took together the pieces that she could find in her research, and then also just pieces that she knows from historical context to weave together this amazing story. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I read this book because of my research for Anne de Bretagne, because I'm trying to do more research about powerful queens leading up to Anne. And so these queens are significantly before Anne, but I do think they lay a lot of groundwork for how female monarchs were perceived, and kind of how these tropes, sly, being cunning, being evil, being selfish, being really narcissistic, like all of those things kind of like multiply and appear, and just being cruel, and just like a lot of themes like that. So I think that was really interesting. I thought that the book wasn't that wonderfully organized, and I think that's partly because there wasn't a ton of resources for the author to go off of. Some of it had to be speculation, and some of it also just felt like a little redundant and circular. But I will say the last chapter of the book wrapped it up really well. I finally understood why the author decided to write about these two women, and kind of what they bring to the table and how they shape the historical narrative after that, and also how we view history today. It's just also insane to like conceptualize how much power these women had, and how they really decided that they weren't going to let gender get in their way, and they weren't going to try to fit into any boxes that any of the men surrounding them were trying to put them in. And they did some really horrible things. Like, I'm not condoning that. They're really not great people to look up to or anything like that, but I do think they decided that they were going to take power, and they were going to protect that power and protect their family. And there is something interesting to really understand how that happened when you see so many men doing the same thing but way less women, because women didn't have that kind of space or power to do so. The next book that I read in the month of July was I Must Betray You by Ruta Septis. This book takes place in 1989 in Romania with our main character Christian. He's struggling as he's living through this communist regime. Other communist regimes are starting to fall apart and break down all around them, but Romania is really locked in this stronghold. And this is largely because of the informant system that ranges across the whole country, and Christian is tapped to be an informant against his family members and friends and the people that his mother works for. Soon after, he realizes a way for him to rebel against this and kind of take back some of the power that's been removed out of his hands. And so he's faced with these really tough decisions about who to protect, what to do, what to say, how much he actually knows, and things like that. I gave 3 out of 5 stars, and it wasn't a bad book, but after reading all of Ruta Septis's other books, I was disappointed, to say the least. I read Salt to the Sea. No, I read Shades of Grey first by her, and I was obsessed. Loved her style for historical fiction. I thought she did a really great job of bringing characters to life, but also having a lot of historical context there and a lot of great moments between characters that helped you understand what was going on historically, but also just spoke to you as a reader emotionally. And I really admired that in her first book, and so then I read Salt to the Sea, and then I read Fountains of Silence, and of course when I saw that I Must Betray You was coming out, I wanted to read her newest book, and so I picked it up, and I was disappointed because I think that the pacing was not great. I don't think that it was consistent throughout the whole book, and I also think that that did a larger disservice to the characters and the urgency and kind of the importance of this story. This is a very important story. I didn't know much about Romania during or like under this communist regime, and so I wanted to learn more about it. That's always what I look forward to in her books, but I just felt like the pacing really kept me on the outside, and I also felt like I could see the true horror of what was going on through like the informant aspect of it, and then like the little files by the secret police and things like that. But at the same time, Christian just like felt very contrived as a character, as well as a lot of the other characters around him, and it was hard to really get into the book and understand what was truly going on. I also like wasn't a fan of the sexism that was present in the book, because it really was not great, like as far as female characters and female representation. And then the end of the book like kind of dropped the ball, because there's a lot there at the end of the book. There's a lot of like big, not plot twists, but like big reveals, and then nothing was done with them, and that was kind of a letdown for me, because I thought that maybe the end of the book would pull everything together and I would be like, oh, this is why this happened, or this is why it was like this during the book. But honestly, it just felt like nothing happened for a big portion of the book, and then everything happened at the end, and it wasn't really developed nicely. So overall, it was a like average book. I really did learn stuff about the communist regime and Romania at the same time, but nowhere near compared to her other books, so I was just a little disappointed, and that obviously played into my rating a little bit. Next book that I read in the month of July was Netherland Bone by T. Kingfisher. This is a new release, I believe, and when I heard that it was coming out, actually I read a lot of new releases this month, I don't know why I said that. The previous two books were new releases as well, but when I saw it on the shelf, I knew that I had to read it immediately, mostly because of the premise of this book. So Mara is a princess, and she is really tired of seeing her sisters be abused by this terrible prince in a different kingdom, and she has been sequestered in like a little convent kind of deal, and so she decides she's going to break out and help her sister, and she does that by assembling an odd group of people. It's a grave witch, a fairy godmother, an ex-soldier, and a chicken possessed by a demon. So a wonderful little group of people that go on this quest, and that's why I knew I wanted to read it, because it just sounded so charming, but also just really unique to me, and like not in like a like bad kind of quirky way, but like in an interesting way. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. It was another mediocre book for me. I read in the back of the book, I think like in the author's note or something, that this book started as a short story, and you can definitely tell, because the beginning of the book does not mesh well with the rest of the book. You can tell that it started out independently than the rest of the book, because it doesn't really get treated well, it doesn't develop, it doesn't fully connect, and I feel like a lot of different pieces were dropped as other parts were focused on later on in the book. So I just feel like many aspects of the book were underdeveloped. This included like themes. There's a lot of dark themes, like some really heavy stuff going on, but it just felt like we stayed on the surface the whole time, and like the author wasn't really willing to like dive deep into them. The book was fairly small also, so this was part of it, I think, but there are other great parts of the book. I really liked Mara as a character. I thought she was really unique. I think she offers a perspective that doesn't often appear in fantasy, and I think that that was really wonderful. I loved the romance featured in this book. I thought it was very sweet and heartwarming and just lovely to read, and I also just liked the group of people that came together. I thought They really played off each other well. I thought there were some great moments between the characters, and I also just thought it was pretty original without like trying too hard. But at the same time, it just felt like parts of it were underdeveloped. Themes, the character of the prince, just relative aspects of pacing and the length of the book. I don't know. It just felt like it fell short overall, but I really liked a lot of pieces of it. And I would be interested in reading other books by this author. The fourth book that I read in the month of July was Kaiki by Vaishnavi Patel. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. This was my book of the month for the month of April, but I think I either got it in April or May. I honestly don't remember, but I did get it through Book of the Month. This is from the Roman. I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong. I tried to look up pronunciations before this video, but I was still struggling. So this is a retelling of the Roman through the perspective of Kaiki, who was the evil stepmother who banished her stepson or son Ram from becoming king and instead put her own son on the throne. And she's been really seen as like evil, terrible, selfish, wicked, all of those typical adjectives for a woman in power. And this is a retelling of this because the author really felt like every time she heard this story growing up that there was something missing, that there was something more to the character of Kaiki, and that she really would have more depth. And so that's essentially what this book is about, is giving her a backstory and kind of what led up to that moment of banishing Ram. I gave this book 3.5 out of 5 stars. Honestly, I was leaning towards 3, but I decided to like bump it up half a star. Yeah, but I hated the book for most of it because I knew it was going to be a feminist take, a feminist retelling. I understood that. I respect that. I love that because I'm reading books like this again and again. But I really was annoyed by the way it was written. It was extremely heavy-handed. It relied too much on the fact of I'm a woman, so that's that. Like, everything's harder for girls automatically, but then, like, there was no nuance in that. There was no, exploration of that. It was just, like, fact, and so it was very simplistic and two-dimensional and frustrating, honestly, because I felt like it did a disservice to this character, because that's the point, is to give her a more lush and fleshed out backstory, and it kind of didn't. Again, the themes are important, but it just lacked the nuance of so many things, and also the representation of women in this book is not great. There's so many women, but they're just so flat and just boring, and I didn't like that. I wanted more, and I just was getting really frustrated with that, and really frustrated with the premise of this book not lining up with what was happening in the execution. But at the same time, by the end of the book, I was more invested in the story. I was more interested in to see what was happening. I thought there were some really great parts of the book that I was really drawn into. And I think that the ideas that were trying to be accomplished were there. And the next book that I read in the month of July was Just Mercy, A Story of Justice and Redemption by Bryan Stevenson. So this is another nonfiction book for this month, but it's actually a memoir. And this book came out in 2014, I think, or something like that. But I don't think I became aware of it until the movie was going to be released. And then immediately I joined my TBR, and I was really excited to read it, and wow, this book blew me away. Really, truly, it was stunning, and I definitely would say it's one of my favorite books of this year. I think that there was so much richness in this book. Bryan Stevenson, as an author writing his story and his experiences, was so talented. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. His humanity and passion towards his work and the things that he has done and continues to do is just really inspiring. It's really great to read about. It often feels like it's hopeless. A lot of things just seem hopeless in this country, and I know that I come from such a place of privilege for a variety of reasons. But even as someone in my place, I just see so many problems that are systemic that I don't even know where to begin. And it was so impactful to read about Bryan Stevenson's story and his ability to make a difference, because he truly has made a difference and continues to make a difference. And his impact has expanded greatly across this country and honestly across the world. This is a tough read, I'm not gonna lie. There's a lot of heavy content in here. There's a lot of really tough moments, scenes, scenarios, issues. But I was crying in every single chapter, and it wasn't always out of sadness. There was tears of joy as well. It was just a beautiful book. This book truly changed my reading for this summer. It changed my perception on so many things. I learned so much about the legacy of the death penalty, the legacy that slavery and racism has had intersecting with the death penalty. I have known for a while about racism, slavery, the criminal justice system. I know all that. But I did not know much about the death penalty, to be honest. And it was even worse than I could have imagined. I highly recommend this book. It was so powerful. It was so amazing, so well written, so well constructed. I can't rave enough about this book, and it's definitely a book I want to purchase, put in my collection, read again and again and again. This is an inspiring book, and it was just great to read. Truly, I recommend it so much. The book that I read in the month of July was How Much of These Hills is Gold by C. Pam Zhang. And this book is about a sibling duo, Lucy and Sam. Their parents die. Their mother dies first, and then their father dies in the night, and they have to find an appropriate way to bury him and follow tradition. And so these two siblings go on that quest to bury him properly. This book, 4 out of 5 stars. Honestly, could be 3.5, but I think I'm going with 4 overall. I thought that the characters were so strong in this book. Lucy and Sam were very strong characters. I thought they were extremely well developed. I loved their relationship with each other. I thought it was so interesting the way that they interacted, and also the complexity of their relationship, I think, was a pretty good portrayal of how sibling relationships work. Obviously, this is not my sibling relationship with any of my siblings, but I do think oftentimes sibling relationships lack complexity and nuance, and so I really appreciated that. I also think it was a really fascinating historical perspective to read from. This is during the gold rush, and it is also in the west of the United States, and it is also during a time when the prejudice against those coming from Asia was extremely strong. It covered a lot of important themes such as identity, race, belonging, what it means to be part of the American dream. Does the American dream exist? No, it doesn't, but anyway. Things like that, and I just really enjoyed that part. The parts that I didn't like about it as much is I had some issues with the whole lyrical aspect of this book. A lot of people love this book because of the writing style and kind of how it goes into not quite magical realism, but a lot of beautiful writing and very lyrical, flowy. But anyway, I didn't love that because I felt sometimes I got lost in that, and that I was just covering up nothing happening. And I also just had some issues with the developments at the end. The weird jump in time wasn't really well done, and then I had a lot of questions by the end of the book, and not in a good way. So I just had some reservations about that, but overall I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad that I was able to read it. So those are all the books that I read in the month of July. We are now in the month of August. I go back to school in a week, which is kind of insane to think about, and we're just wrapping up the summer as we get along with that. So school videos will be coming very soon. If you have any book recommendations, video recommendations, questions, anything like that, feel free to leave it down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and I will see you all next week.